Apologies in advance for my voice, I do have a touch of laryngitis. The Long Dark is a definitive survival experience from Hinterland Studios. You take on the role of a crash-landed bush pilot trying to survive in the Canadian wilderness. Having initially released in alpha back in 2017, it's seen a number of revisions and additions, but how does it hold up on Switch? Better than my voice? Let's find out. If there's one area that most survival games fail with for me, it's got to be the story mode. The Long Dark, though, offers episodic story modes which have a strong narrative and interesting characters, which gave the game a far more unnerving feeling than I was expecting.
The men, they passed through town the night of the storm.
In fact, Glen put it really well when he likened it to the Silent Hill titles. You'll meet some really strange characters along the way, and it has a dark and unnerving undertone.
Don't you see the signs?
That perfectly parallels your perilous position. After crashing your plane into the mountains, your female companion will go missing, and much of the early narrative surrounds where she's gone to, what the relationship was between them in the past, but this then opens up to include the mystery surrounding the town near to where you've crash landed. You'll find fragments of old notes, remnants of the past, and through reading these, you'll gradually piece together what's happened to this place. I thought the story on the whole does an excellent job of giving you a few difficult choices, and much like The Walking Dead, a couple of opportunities to define the type of person you are.
Sorry, I don't understand.
And you'll wonder to yourself why exactly you care about this strange blind old lady in this town, but you will, and that's down to Hinterland's excellent writing and narration. The core game is split into several different modes. Wintermute are those episodic story campaigns, there's survival, and this offers 4 different difficulty modes, as well as one you can completely customize. Aside from the main story, one of the coolest things for me were the challenges. These small survival scenarios offer a very specific task for you to complete, such as climbing the highest mountain peak, or one where you're trying to survive in the wilderness while being stalked by a brown bear. It's absolutely terrifying. We'll focus on the story segment for the rest of the review, and I'll go through the different mechanics. First things first, the developers chose an interesting approach. There's absolutely no tutorial, and for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, you'll die over and over again. While I initially lamented this decision, I do now partially understand it. It gives the player a very unique feeling of not only fear, but the panic and struggle that you may have to do if you were in a scenario such as this. You'll soon realise that you can hold down a trigger to bring up a radial menu, and through the gathering of any materials you find on the ground, you'll then be able to make a fire, but even that can be difficult, depending on exactly what you built it with and if you've got any accelerant. Otherwise, there's a good chance your fire will go out while you're trying to light it. Your next task will be to get an old can, melt some snow, and try and quench your thirst. To track your progress, you're going to want to look down in the bottom left corner of the screen. Temperature, fatigue, thirst, and hunger. And any actions you undertake in the game will take time, and these will drop. To give you an idea of the kind of survival things you can do, it follows a very logical path. Things like leaving food out, which can be used to lure wild animals, of which there are several in the game. And let me tell you, the wolves are absolutely terrifying, but if you choose to face them by either throwing a rock or attacking them in some other way, the next time you encounter them, they'll be more wary of you. A lot of your time will be spent scavenging, be it in old abandoned buildings, looking through cars, or searching in bins. It feels very much like a zombie movie without the zombies. And gradually over time, you'll build up a number of tools which are essential for progression. For example, if you're freezing to death using your hacksaw to destroy a table and then desperately cobbling together a fire, you'll be surprised how tense the lighting of your last match will be. The thing with the Long Dark is how it lulls you into a false sense of security. It plays out in a very realistic fashion, whereby you may sleep in a bed, wake up, have to drink some toilet water, eat some dog food before heading out, and you'll be feeling great. You've repaired all your gear using a sewing kit, you've found a tin of peaches, and the weather's actually semi-decent. You're using the sun to navigate, which incidentally you can actually do, and you're making your way towards your next main objective. Then all of a sudden a storm whips up, which absolutely destroys your visibility, and for some stupid reason you foolishly decide to repair your socks while you're outside, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, leads to frostbite and you lose one of your toes. You run into the nearest building, huddle shivering in a corner, and wait for your temperature to rise. Then you get back on your path, a little bit bruised, but certainly not beaten. You trudge through the snow, the blizzard whipping up all around you, and when you arrive, you hear the howl of a wolf. And remembering just how well that worked out for you last time, you pull a stone from your pocket, only for the wolf to charge head first into your arm, sinking its fangs deep into your skin. Bleeding and battered, you run for the farmhouse, and what follows is a desperate attempt to rip pieces of clothing up to bandage your own wounds, and struggle through the cabinets to find some antibiotics and painkillers so that infection doesn't build and lead to your untimely demise. I think that pretty much sums up the game in a nutshell. If you're a survival game enthusiast and you've not played it before, there's far more to the game than I could possibly scratch the surface of in this time, but just know it's actually logical and feels very fair, and despite perhaps being a touch too hands-off for some players in the early stages, there's a real sense of discovery as you find a new item and unlock a new crafting ability, and unleashing your inner MacGyver in the wilderness hasn't been done this well, I don't think, in any other game. Being first person, you generally control everything with the left stick, camera with the right, and there are some gyro controls. They're just a wee bit sensitive by default. You can change the Y-axis, but not the X-axis. Overall for me, the developers possibly should have done a bit more to teach new players, but I do understand their decisions. The controls are okay, and the addition of gyroscopic always gets brownie points from me. There are some clunkier moments to the game, but I was pleased to find that you can save at any point manually. However, the auto-saving can cause a few issues in terms of stutter, but that's more for the performance segment. Gameplay for me scores 16 out of 20. I thought they did a good job with the controls, and the radial menu is a really good idea, as is the gyro aiming. The sensitivities can just be a touch wonky at times. Controls score 17 out of 20. Visually speaking, there's no two ways about it. The Long Dark on Switch is a little bit rough, from the aliasing on the edges of objects through to some of the worst textures I've ever seen. Now it does go for that low texture, low poly look, but on Switch it goes a step too far. It ends up just looking bad at times. Character models look like something out of a different era, and although there are some beautiful moments in the wilderness, there's also a good deal of pop-in. Frame rates though, thankfully, remain 30 or above. And if that hadn't have been the case, I would have absolutely not recommended you even consider this one. As it is, if you can get past those visuals, there's a really enjoyable game here. There are a couple of nice moments, like the weather effects when a storm rushes in, but where it really excels is the audio.
I think I'm warming up.
The voice actors are pretty decent, but it's the environmental sound which is excellent. With a set of good headphones, the sounds of the wind whipping up in the background or a deadly howl in the darkness were enough to make me stop in my tracks. It also does that stylish music thing where a piece will just randomly play from time to time, not very often, but when it does, it seems to have more of an impact. One final point on the performance are the load times. They're quite long. They just fall within the acceptable range, but you will have to load whenever you go in and out of buildings, which you'll be doing quite often. Overall for me then, I give visuals and performance 12 out of 20, and the audio on the flip side gets 18 out of 20. For a seasoned player, you could probably bust through the story in around about 18 to 20 hours, but when you factor in the mains and the extra content, as well as those survival modes, you're then looking at potentially hundreds of hours of playtime. It does also have a mild Switch tax of a few pounds, but I think for 25 quid essentially, I would have expected a better job on the visuals and overall presentation. And that's where I'd suggest if you have access to another system, that might be the way to go. However, it really is cool playing this one in handheld. It's got a reasonable download size of 8 gigs and is completely Switch-like compatible. Overall, I give value 15 out of 20. The Long Dark then is probably the best survival game I've ever played, and while it has a few quirks on the Switch, there's still a lot of game to enjoy here. I just hope they do a little bit of work on those visuals and performance, and for some this might be one to add to your wish list until it goes on a deeper sale. It scores a SwitchUp score of 78%. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this one. I'm now not going to speak for the next 2 days because my voice and my throat are killing me. Big thanks to all of you. We really appreciate it. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. Don't think I'm even going to be able to do the see ya. Let's try. No chance. Sorry. I'll have to use an old recording. See ya!